Hi everyone, thanks for being here with us today. I think this is a very exciting panel for all of us that are residing in Athens and other city centers, because we might be seeing some bright spots about our cities, but definitely there are areas that can improve and offer us the opportunity to live in a more sustainable, resilient city that we are happy every day to wake up, commute in our city. So I'm very excited today to have with us speakers that are active in this field, and with their businesses they are fostering this transformation, and they are helping each one of us that reside in those big cities to have a better standard of living. So without further ado, I will start with Lina, Global Director of Resilient Cities Network, and I will ask her about the challenges the network and yourself, Lina, you identify in Athens and other large cities, and the ways you are fostering greater urban resiliency on those cities.
Thank you, Christos. The Resilient Cities Network is a global city network, and our members are local authorities from across the globe. In Greece, we have Athens and Thessaloniki as our members. Our overall mission is to help those local governments build the resilience to the various shocks and stresses they face. We've been working with Athens and Thessaloniki since 2015, and at that point, resilience was a complete unknown concept. If it wasn't for the visionary mayors at that point, we wouldn't be able to work with the two cities. And at the beginning, the priority was how to build the understanding of what resilience is and build the capabilities and the necessary governance arrangements. At that point, the cities and their stakeholders didn't either recognize, understand, manage, or, of course, reduce the risk. Apart from the civil protection departments, nobody actually talked about risks, or even if they did, in a very siloed way. So 7 years after that, in both Athens and Thessaloniki, there are institutionalized resilience offices within local authorities, and there is a resilience strategy that builds and informs the various climate and strategic documents of the city. Currently, we are focusing on two themes with the two cities. One, we are supporting them in their transition towards being climate neutral by 2030. Both of them are part of the European Commission's mission for 100 climate neutral and smart cities by 2030. So we're building with them their city climate contracts. And also we are working with them, and especially Athens, in trying to better integrate climate services and innovative climate solutions in, again, better understanding and managing the impacts of climate change, most notably heat. So this is, in a nutshell, what we've been doing with the two Greek cities.
Okay. I'm just doing a follow-up question on your introduction. So when you land in a new city, or where you visit for the first time the mayor and you have a conversation, what are the first things that pop to your mind that this is the most imminent fix that needs to be taken now? Is it improving the public buildings? Is it installing solar panels on the roof of the buildings? Is it renovating the existing building stock? What would be your priority as soon as you land in the office?
How you build the skills of the people within the local authority and the understanding to the broader community. We are, in a sense, agnostic to the specific shocks and stresses.
Okay, so the first step would be to the people that are involved in those actions themselves to be ready to take the necessary actions to take things forward. Okay, makes sense. Okay. I'm moving on to Adonis, CEO of Protio. Protio is a platform that facilitates investments of individual investors in real estate in Greece. And I would like to learn more about the business and how you are helping foster more sustainable cities.
Thanks, Christos. Well, our motto is rebuilding our cities, one apartment at a time. Since we are at an impact investing conference, I think we also democratize impact investing by enabling pretty much any investor out there, any individual investor, hopefully soon also institutional investors, to help us help make our cities more sustainable. Now, how we do that is with our business model that we call rebuild to rent. So essentially, we turn old apartments into affordable and sustainable homes, rental homes, and by making them into rental homes, we also provide passive rental income to investors. Now, essentially, we put in motion three things. One is the capital that an investor has and wants to have income from that capital. The second thing is the ownership that an individual owner has and wants to unlock the equity that he has into that asset and make something out of it. And the last thing is the need that a tenant has, like a family, a young professional, for decent housing, for a place to call home. Now, why is this important and how does this have to do with sustainable cities? We do know we have two major problems at the moment. One is the fact that we have an energy crisis, so we need to reduce the carbon footprint of our cities. The second thing is an environmental, a social crisis, a housing crisis, essentially. We know that the tenants out there are struggling. 9 out of 10 families are actually struggling to find a decent place to call home. So how we solve those issues is part of the business model. Now, why we do it and why these problems exist is because of a series of data points. One is that real estate plays a major role on the CO2 emissions. We know 36% of CO2 emissions are driven by buildings all around Europe. We know also that in terms of housing shortage, this is driven because of the very old housing stock that we currently have. Our cities were built in the 50s, the 60s, when people moved from the villages to the city. So we know there are around 700,000 empty apartments in Greece, and this is out of 5.5 million properties. All around Europe, we know that at least 20% of the housing stock is empty, it's vacant. And the reason is that it's very old, so people can't really live in it. And if they did, it would have a big impact on the energy cost and the CO2 emissions. Now, the last thing, which is very important, another data point on the problem and why the solution we propose we think is very crucial, is that when we build a new apartment, we create 100 tons of CO2. When we rebuild an old apartment by renovating it, we only create 15 tons of CO2. So we think that the best way to solve the issue is not to build new properties, but to rebuild the already existing stock. And this is what the business model does, by helping also the environment and society at the same time.
Sounds very interesting. So I want to follow up on that and challenge you just a bit. So One question would be, okay, if an investor comes to you and says, I like the building you have renovated, I'm going to buy it, but I'm not going to lease it to a long-term tenant. I'm going to go the short-term rental route. I'm going to put it on some of the rental platforms, and because this gives me better ROI. After all, I'm an investor.
Right.
This one could say that it could not help solving the housing crisis. It could make it worse because the house would be vacant most of the time, generate revenue during some periods, and as you said, a young professional would not be able to find a home. What would you say to that investor? What would be your response to this demand?
I will tell you what we actually say, which is that we don't work with short-term rental. We only create a product by renovating an old apartment and putting it in the long-term market. So this is, we only work with investors who are aligned with our vision and what we think is a good solution to a big problem. So we wouldn't do that, and we don't do that actually. So the only focus is long-term, because we want to help also the environment and society at the same time. Although, I would challenge whether short-term rental is actually such a big issue for the whole housing crisis. I think the biggest issue is the age of the housing stock, but this is a different topic.
Okay. I don't know, Lina, would you like to add to that? What's your perspective? So Adonis said that probably the most important aspect that increases the housing crisis is the age of the building stock and that many apartments remain empty because the owners decide or do not have the capital to renovate it and then rent it to someone else. What's your thought on this? How is the network approaching this issue?
Well, this has been an issue from, I think we've been discussing it within the local authorities since 2016 or 2017, so this is definitely not new. I'm not sure that short-term doesn't contribute a lot to the housing crisis we have, but I agree that a big percentage has to do with the empty apartments. What is interesting is in Thessaloniki, actually the city itself, through European funding, they started to create a very initial concept, this kind of almost a rental authority, where they're trying to pull together these kind of empty apartments, being able to provide affordable housing, especially to the very vulnerable communities and refugees and so on, while at the same time retrofitting them. So I think there are a lot of synergies there between the private sector and, of course, the local authorities that have very limited capabilities and also responsibilities around the issue.
Thanks. Very interesting perspective. Now moving on to you, Lars. So you have consistently been ahead of technology advancements, and you have been able to identify opportunities and act on that, and also develop your own solutions that became industry-leading solutions in the tech world today. And now it seems that you are identifying a specific opportunity here in improving the sustainability of cities and improving the existing building stock. I would like to know what made you decide to invest in this field, and a follow-up question on that, if you identify other areas in the sustainable cities field or elsewhere that you are very keenly focusing on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So when we look at investing in our startups, we're angel investors now, my wife and I, we look first at the mission. Everything is about the mission. If someone comes and says, hey, put some money here, and then in 5 years that money will have grown, we actively say no to that unless they create something meaningful for the world. One of our best investments actually is Canva, wearing their shirt now. It's not impact in the sense of this conference here, but the wealth that got created there, the founders are actually putting it back into environmental impact, poverty issues in Africa, and so on. It's amazing. Now, what attracted us about Protio was the mission itself. It's actually one of the only times we've invested in a startup that doesn't immediately have a global ambition. But the impact is so big that even if it's just the region, Southeast Europe, it's well worth the effort. The other thing is we look at the past of the entrepreneur, of course. So we know Adonis from his previous startup that we almost invested in Incredible, which we thought was incredible. And even though it didn't quite take off, we could observe it. Here's an entrepreneur who knows how to make things happen. And so it was a pretty easy choice to invest in this company. And actually, I don't know if I should say this in public, but so far we've bought some equity in the startup, but we're also thinking to do investment through the other route of buying some apartments, and these guys will fix them up, and someone will get a nice home, sustainable home to live in here, which is great. Other things we've invested in of a similar nature, there's a company in Berlin called Dance. They do electric bikes and electric scooters on a rental, a subscription model, so you pay a modest amount of money per month to get the full thing. You get the bike with you, you get it repaired, you get it replaced if it gets stolen, you get a nice app. The whole thing comes from a small amount of money. I wish they would launch in Athens, but unfortunately we're not top of their list. They look for flatter cities first. But, you know, I was born in Copenhagen, and like half the city commutes by bike, even before electric bikes, and which probably has a similar impact to electrifying all the cars, but with substantially less effort here. So that's great. And again, we looked at the mission. We looked at the founders. This company happens to be done by the duo that founded SoundCloud, if you know, the Swedish music company. We invested in a company in the UK called Zulu Forest. They use satellite images to identify plots of land that are not currently being used, that could be reforested easily, sold as carbon credits, and they kind of organize the whole thing as a similar flavor, right? That you own a piece of land, you're not using it, they will organize the whole thing for you. They will find a company that can reforest it. They will organize the sale of the carbon credits, make a bit of money for the landowner, and help with the CO2 capture that way. Your last question, what are we interested in now? Well, so all of these things together, a couple of particular things I'm getting excited about here in Athens is one of the big reactions that happens to industrial food production is the kind of micro something movement. Like I just interned at a micro bakery here in Athens called Cora. So you would see me making bread in the middle of the night, which is fun in itself. But the founders, the two young women, fantastic entrepreneurs that founded, they want to scale this. And so the question is, can you take these micro bakeries, micro farms, micro something, and scale them to industrial size? Because the bread, you should all go have bread at Cora, is amazing, but it is also pricey because of the small batch production. Another thing, cement production, very different from bread. I'm not trying to make the two the same, but the cement production and concrete production is responsible for 10% of the world's CO2 emissions, and it's a yet somewhat unsolved problem how to fix that. It's not just a matter of scaling. And then so I've started a survey in my network of what startups we found, maybe 10 or so, that's trying to fix that problem. And then we're also trying to make relationships with people that actually make cements, like the Titan Group and so on, trying to figure out how we can help maybe bridging the gap between what it's like to make cements at industrial scale versus being a startup trying to fix the environmental impact issues.
Thank you so much for taking us through your investments, and it's totally transparent that you are, as you said, you are focusing on the impact side, and of course, if these companies can also be very sustainable financially, it makes sense as well on the capitalist side, of course. I have a follow-on question because you mentioned living in Copenhagen, that is a city that in many areas would be regarded as having a better standard of living to Athens, maybe one would argue. So I would like to hear your perspective on that. What's something you found in Athens that was not present in Copenhagen? What are elements of Athens that you are missing from your past home? What could be improved?
You mean what I'm missing from Denmark that doesn't exist here, or the other way around? Sorry.
Yeah. So both sides. So. What made Athens unique for you and helped you decide to make this one of your main habitats? And also, what could be improved so you feel even better in Athens?
Yes, that's a very good question. So I'm married to a Greek goddess. This was my ticket to your beautiful city. She couldn't make it here today. But yeah, it's, the reason I enjoy living here, it's the same reasons that you're one of the world's top holiday destination. It's the weather, it's the incredible people, the hospitality of the people, it's the food, it's the islands, it's the lifestyle here. But I also really enjoy the spirit of people, and this is surprising, I'll be honestly, to people outside, but I think people here work much harder than a lot of places I've lived. And there's sort of there's a feeling here of like springtime after a long winter, and if we work hard, we can get out of the situation. You mentioned that the standard of living, like if you measure in GDP per habitant, it's higher in Denmark than here, right? But that also makes people work harder, and I like that, and I think it's a more dynamic environment for someone like me to live in, where you might in other places, including Silicon Valley, where I lived a bunch, where you find more of like an entitlement. I'm entitled to a high-paying job. I'm entitled to not work very hard because I happen to be born here, or happen to have gone to school here, and so on. And I find it more interesting to live in a place like this.
So I guess adversity, Greece has went through a lot, so adversity destroys entitlement because you actually have no other choice. So this is something good, one would say, that could come out of this situation. And it's up to us to make good use of it, of course. I would like also the other speaker's perspective on this. Adonis, you're also living in Athens, I understand, and one of the challenges you have identified is the old buildings and vacant buildings. You acted upon that. What other elements of the city you would like to change?
That's a very good question. So, I mean, look, I grew up in a village very close to the sea. So I think we have, Greece is very lucky to have such a big coastline. I think it would be nice if Athens would get to improve the services around the coastline. I think this is something that would drive more demand and probably increase the quality of life of people and giving more access to such a precious thing to more people, I think would be very useful. Other than that, you know, I read this post saying that, you know, choosing where you live is one of the decisions that's going to have a major impact on your life, because it's actually very important, very correlated with the market size, with access to the community, with access to financing. So I think, you know, we're making steps towards becoming better in all of that and generally having more access to more things. So it seems like we're on the right track. So, yeah, we still have a long way to go, though.
Lina, what's your thought on this? What would you improve in Athens or Thessaloniki?
I don't want to focus on what I will improve. I would like actually to answer what makes the Greek cities unique. And I think this is a great asset and also has been a challenge. Is that the concept of polykatikia for the non-Greek speakers is the multi-story apartments. It's this kind of layering that the Greek cities have. You know, the storefronts, potentially some housing behind, and then you have all the apartments, then you might have like a bigger one at the top. So this creates diversity. This creates, you know, vibrant communities. This is something that most European cities the last decade are trying to create, this kind of vibrant street life. And we had it, and we have it, and we need to ensure that we maintain it. So seeing issues around gentrification, or again, this is the importance of updating the old buildings, not focusing on the you know, only uses around cafes, entertainment, but actually finding ways and incentives to keep local shops and commercial shops and all of this. So the big priority, and again, my focus is the public authorities, is how the public authorities, what are the policies, the incentives, the plans that they need to put in place to allow and facilitate this. And I think that's the crucial, because Greek cities are very unique, and I mean, most of the people that come here just fall in love with the Greek cities, even with all the problems that we identify as being natives here.
Makes absolute sense. I fully agree with you. There are neighborhoods in Athens that are very unique, so it's a good idea to preserve this. Just throwing also my thoughts on this, one element that I would like to see improved in Athens is the mobility situation. I think traffic is a huge issue in Athens. In my opinion, it's the worst detrimental factor from the city. On our side, we're trying to foster electromobility with EV loader, achieving a higher penetration of electric vehicles and charging infrastructure. But in my opinion, would like less cars. It doesn't matter whether it is EVs or non-EVs. We would like to see less cars on the cities, more bikes, and better transportation, public transportation system to take Athens to the next level, in my opinion. So again, I want to stay in real estate because we have an expert here with us on real estate, and I want to ask on your side whether your decision to focus on this mission and say, okay, I want to focus on long-term tenants, I want to focus on improving my city. Has it ever cost you clients? Have you ever have clients coming to you and saying, oh, no way, I'm doing long-term tenants. The long-term tenant might leave a burden, might not pay the rent on time. I don't want that. I just want to go with Airbnb and rent it 5 times per month and make the full month revenue. Have you ever lost clients that approached you in that way?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, right now we have a bit more than, I think, 3,500 individual investors who are looking actively on the platform in order to invest. And not all of them have become clients, of course. And I think the reason is, one part is like being a startup means that you really need to understand the persona that you are serving and get to product market fit. So on that road, we are very selective and we're being very focused, and this costs us clients every day. Now, that is one thing. The other thing is that the service of Protio is an A to Z service, right? So you need to trust the platform in order to get the whole transaction process done. So you cannot select your own notary, you cannot select your own legal advisor. This is one thing. So you need to trust the platform. The other thing is you need to trust the proposal of the platform regarding what is the best renovation that I should do on the property in order to have the maximum impact, but at the same time, the maximum possible yield. So this is also something that has cost us clients. And the other thing is the end result, like that putting the property on the long-term market instead of putting it in the short-term market. This has also cost us clients. But I think there are like lots of potential, lots of people who are open to this solution that has impact, and you don't want everyone to be your client, and I think that's a good thing at the end of the day. And the clients of the platform will also become ambassadors and get more like-minded investors to choose such an investment for their portfolio.
Got it. I fully understand the approach. It's better to work with people that share common values with you and want to have this as a passive way to make money and trust you that you are doing a good job, than having clients that have different objectives than what align with yours. So before we open this to Q&A, I would like to have a final question. I'm going back to one element you mentioned in the beginning of your introduction. You said that renovating an existing building produces less CO2 emissions than building a new one. And I would like the whole panel's perspective on this. What's your choice, A or B? A, renovating an existing building. This might mean that in the same plot you might have a less high building, so less apartments, maybe. And also you might not be able to achieve the same level of energy efficiency as a new building throughout the building's life. So in the beginning you have lower CO2 emissions, but throughout the lifetime of the building you might have slightly higher CO2 emissions than the new building that was built with new materials from ahead. What's your choice, A or B? Renovate existing, probably we know your choice. Renovating the existing building stock, building a new one. What's your call?
I'm extremely biased.
Makes sense.
So, one thing is we don't do buildings. Mm-hmm. We only do apartments because the whole market is so fragmented, because everybody owns a home in Greece. Mm-hmm. We have like 78% home ownership, so you can't really buy a building because you need to do 20 transactions at the same time, which is pretty much impossible. It's very rare, at least. Now, I get this question a lot, if you don't have a building and you can only do an apartment, what's the impact? The impact is the same like if you would do a building. You actually have the government in Greece has given you the choice to be fully autonomous. You can install tents, you can improve the insulation of the facade, you have autonomous energy heating, and you can install your solar thermosiphonas, Liakou, I don't know how it's in English, on the roof. So we usually get to upgrade at like 2 to 3 energy classes, and the difficulty that we are facing is the fact that consumers, the tenants, are not yet fully buying into the whole energy efficiency part, so they don't really care about having all those. They don't pay the premium of the investment required to upgrade the property even more. But I think we will get there. So we have 5.5 million already existing properties in Greece. We know we have more than 700,000 empty. So I think we just should not build more. We don't have lots of land anyway, but it's pretty straightforward for me.
Makes sense. Understood. Lars, what's your thought on this? You're also biased. There's a conflict of interest as an investor here.
Yeah, look, I can't give you anything different from what I know.
Makes sense.
Sorry.
Lina, what's your thought?
I mean, obviously there are a lot of factors, but in general, if you can retrofit, you need to retrofit.
Yep.
But it depends. It depends on the density, it depends on the housing needs, it depends on how you could actually, if you are to replace, you could take more circularity approaches. But in general, also from a social perspective, it is better to retrofit because you minimize the risk of pushing out the existing kind of community that lives there.
Yep. And also a new building increases the cost of ownership even more, so it makes sense.
But the ownership issue is a critical issue for Greece if you want to make big changes and move towards the climate neutrality transition, and it's a big hurdle.
So you mean this on the side that there should be less ownership of...
No, it is a reality.
Okay.
It's a characteristic of the Greek society but it is an obstacle. Like why do Greek cities look like that? Why we don't have bigger green spaces? All of these have to do with how these cities were built, and ownership is a critical factor in comparison to other European cities where the municipality, for example, owns half of the buildings. So they can do major redevelopments.
Got it. Thanks a lot for your perspectives. I would like now to open to Q&A from our guests. There are two questions here on the front row and on the fifth.
Yes. Hi, I'm Adam, founder of the Greek Dance, which will be very happy to bring you back, Lars, just as a small thank you for the gigabytes of memory you have saved from my brain with Google Maps. So really thank you for that. It's a question to you, actually. What do you advise hardware startup founders, when they're fundraising, where to focus, how to pitch their startups, which will definitely have very different economics from the usual software companies that investors, have been trained to look on. What's your advice to a startup like us?
Yeah, it's really hard. Actually, the Berlin dance that we invested in is facing this too, right? So they were software entrepreneurs and went to build hardware. Along with the software solution, they're having to raise a lot more money. And they're finding it a little bit harder this year than last year for obvious reasons. And my advice is to have a really good story about your unit economics at this stage and prove it out as early as you can. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that's really the game you're in.
There was a question on the fifth row, I think.
Thank you. My name is Natasha. I work for Enterprise Greece, which is a public authority under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Actually, my question is for Mrs. Liakou. I was wondering how come only Athens and Thessaloniki are members of your network? And is it the public authorities, the local authorities that come to you first, or is it you that approach the local authorities? Thank you.
So we are a small network of 98 cities across the globe that was created, and our founding funder was the Rockefeller Foundation. So this was part of a challenge in 2013-14 to select the 100 cities across the globe. We do not open to new members, but we have and had the opportunities to work with other cities, especially through the climate neutrality and net zero cities program of the European Commission, because there are 6 cities in Greece that are part of that.
There are 2 questions also in the front row.
Hi, I'm Nasia. I'm with the Cyclades Preservation Fund. My question, or rather comment is not really relevant with what we do as a fund, but because the discussion came to the aging building stock and with the recent earthquake in Turkey and with the challenges of the multi-ownership buildings that we have in Greece and no existing policy about how to deal with this, I wonder if there's any comments on your side in terms of what maybe could be done in a city level or maybe investing-wise to incentivize the rest of the owners, let's say, of a building to actually deal with the fact that the aging buildings affect the structural capacity of them. Thank you.
What I can say, Greece has a very robust policy around earthquakes, and this has to do with the previous experience in the 70s. So the issue is specifically for the buildings that were built with the previous building codes, and because of the different, that's a question maybe based on your experience, especially on the makeshift changes that owners have done, how this has impacted their earthquake risk.
So, I mean, so far, at least with all so we have been into a bit more, around 1,000 apartments, properties that we have inspected. We haven't seen, I think in 99% of the properties, we wouldn't see any structural risk. So, but most of them are, 60s plus. There are some exceptions, but usually we haven't seen any structural issues. Even after retrofitting, like even by changing the floor plan, there wouldn't be any structural issue on the building, which is a good thing. Then I think it's because of the legislation that we've had. So we're in a good place on that.
There's one more question here in the front row.
Hi there, I'm Eleanor from Investing for Purpose, and I have a question for Antonios. In your buildings, do you look at the retrofitting with using sustainable products, and do you also look at the energy efficiency of the retrofitting when you do that?
Yeah. So on the sustainable products side, we make a suggestion to each individual investor with regards to the floor plan, with regards to the add-ons in order to increase the energy efficiency, and with regards to the material selection. It's up to the investor to select the materials at the end, but I have to say that I think more than 50% do get to choose products that are in some manner more sustainable versus like traditional products. So that's a good thing. We don't want to make them focus so much only on the selection of the products. With regards to retrofitting, yes, we do. So every time we inspect the property, we have a system where even if they don't have an energy certificate, we do estimate very easily with our system what is the current energy certificate, the CO2 emissions, and the energy consumption of the property. And our retrofitting suggestion also takes into account how to maximize the improvements on the energy efficiency side. So we do both things.
Thank you.
There are no other questions from our guests. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for the great conversation.